In the heart of Chicago, where the wind bites and the crowd roars, the stage was set for a seismic showdown. Dricus Du Plessis, the middleweight king, locked eyes with Khamzat Chimaev, the undefeated force who's been tearing through the UFC like a wildfire. At UFC 319, the ceremonial weigh-ins exploded into chaos. Chimaev lunged, Du Plessis held firm, and security scrambled to hold back the storm. This wasn't just a face-off. This was a declaration of war. The United Center, packed to the rafters on August 15, 2025, hummed with raw anticipation. Fans had waited years for this, a collision between two men who've defied expectations, shattered doubts, and carved their names into the MMA world with blood and sweat. Du Plessis, the South African warrior with a style as unpredictable as a storm, has held the 185-pound belt since January 2024, proving his reign is no fluke. Chimaev, the Chechen-born juggernaut, has been a nightmare since his 2020 debut, leaving a trail of broken fighters and unfulfilled title dreams. In Chicago, their paths collided and the air crackled with tension. Let's step back. Dricus Du Plessis wasn't meant to be here. Not as the champion, not as the man headlining one of the UFC's biggest nights. Hailing from Pretoria, South Africa, he was once the underdog, ridiculed for his unorthodox approach, jerky footwork, wild punches, and a relentless pace that breaks even the toughest. Critics called him sloppy. Fans called him weird. But Du Plessis? He called it victory. Since joining the UFC in 2020, he's been flawless, racking up a 9-0 record, each win a defiance of the naysayers. His breakout came at UFC 264, where he obliterated Trevin Giles with a second-round knockout. From there, he climbed the ranks, outlasting Brad Tavares, submitting Darren Till, and stopping Derek Brunson with a barrage of strikes. By 2023, he was a contender, but few saw him as the man to wear gold. That changed at UFC 290 in July 2023. Facing Robert Whittaker, a former champion and one of the division's sharpest technicians, Du Plessis was the underdog. But he didn't care about odds. He overwhelmed Whittaker with suffocating pressure, landing a second-round TKO that sent shockwaves through the MMA world. That was the night still knocks became a problem. 6 months later at UFC 297, he challenged Sean Strickland for the middleweight title. In a brutal 5-round war, Du Plessis edged out a split decision, claiming the belt and etching his name in history. He defended it against Israel's Adesanya at UFC 305, submitting the former champ in the 4th round with a rear-naked choke. Then, in February 2025, he dominated Strickland in a rematch at UFC 312, cementing his dominance. Now, with an 11-fight streak and a 23-2 record, Du Plessis is no longer the outsider. He's the king, and he's ready to face his greatest challenge yet. Across the octagon stands Khamzat Chimaev, a man who's been inevitable since his first UFC fight. 3 fights in 2 months. 3 finishes, 0 damage taken. That was Chimaev's 2020 debut on Fight Island, a whirlwind that had the MMA world buzzing. He submitted John Phillips, knocked out Reese McKee, and then obliterated Gerald Meerschaert with a 17-second KO that still echoes in highlight reels. Chimaev didn't just win, he dominated, making veterans look like novices. His grappling was suffocating, his striking vicious, and his presence terrifying. At 14-0, with 8-0 in the UFC, he's never tasted defeat. But his path to this title shot has been anything but smooth. Chimaev's career is a tale of brilliance and obstacles. Health issues, including a brutal case of COVID-19 that nearly ended his career, kept him out of the cage for months. Weight misses and visa problems added to the delays. The man who seemed invincible was suddenly mortal. Yet Chimaev kept coming. He submitted Li Jingliang at UFC 217, outclassed Gilbert Burns in a 2022 Fighter of the Year contender, and choked out Kevin Holland at UFC 279 after a chaotic fight week. His latest masterpiece came at UFC 308 in October 2024, where he submitted Robert Whittaker in the 1st round, a performance so dominant it erased any doubts about his readiness. Now, at 31, Chimaev is healthy, focused and hungrier than ever. This is his chance to claim the belt he's been chasing for 5 years. If you're watching this and haven't subscribed to MMA Arena, hit that button now. We're diving deep into the raw, unfiltered stories that make this sport unforgettable, and you don't want to miss what's next. The middleweight division has been a war zone of chaos and reinvention. Once dominated by legends like Anderson Silva, who held the belt for nearly 7 years, and Chris Weidman, who dethroned him in 2013, the 885-pound class has seen a revolving door of champions since 2019. Israel Adesanya brought flair and precision, holding the title from 2019 to 2022, only to lose it to Alex Pereira in a stunning upset. Pereira's reign was brief as Adesanya reclaimed the belt in 2023. Then came Du Plessis, the unlikely disruptor who turned the division upside down. The division is stacked with talent: Sean Strickland, Robert Whittaker, Jared Cannonier, Marvin Vettori, Paulo Costa, but none carry the mystique of Chimaev. His rise has been a slow burn, hampered by health and logistical issues, but also by the UFC's cautious matchmaking. Visa troubles and injuries limited his fight schedule, but every time he stepped into the cage, he reminded the world why he's a problem. The road to UFC 319 has been a masterclass in building tension. Du Plessis and Chimaev, despite early moments of respect, have traded barbs that cut deep. Chimaev called Du Plessis a bad version of himself, sparking a fiery response on X. "Put on a shirt, princess, before you catch another cold." Brutal. Du Plessis' coach, Morin Visser, piled on, calling Chimaev one-dimensional and mocking his striking. "We're gonna fuck him up in his own game," Visser said, raising the stakes. Chimaev, unfazed, delivered a chilling reply. "Let them prep for war. I'm prepping for murder." Fans on X went wild, with one posting, "That's the stare of a man who's done things." Another quipped, "Chimaev's face-off vibe is straight-up horror movie." The hype was undeniable. Fight week in Chicago was a pressure cooker. The press conference on August 14th was pure electricity, with the crowd drowning Du Plessis in boos and chanting Chimaev's name. The champion soaked it in, smirking as he said, "Well done, gents, well done." Chimaev fed off the energy, promising to take his head as the crowd erupted. The face-off was intense, too intense. Chimaev stepped forward, words flying, and Dana White jumped in to keep things from boiling over. Then came the ceremonial weigh-ins on Friday. Both men hit 185 pounds, but the stare-down was nothing but ceremonial. Chimaev lunged, shoving Du Plessis, who stood his ground unblinking. Security swarmed, pulling them apart as the United Center roared. "Just going to fuck this boy up," Chimaev growled. Du Plessis, calm as ever, turned to the booing crowd and vowed, "I'm putting that man to sleep." The stage was set for a fight that could redefine the middleweight division. Let's break down the matchup. This is chaos versus control, heart versus havoc. Du Plessis thrives in the storm. His striking is unorthodox, awkward angles, looping punches, and a relentless pace that wears down opponents. He's not afraid to eat a shot to land 2 of his own. His grappling is sneaky, with a submission win over Adesanya proving he's dangerous on the ground. But his real weapon is his cardio. The man doesn't quit. Against Strickland at UFC 297, he pushed a pace that left both fighters gasping, a fight Joe Rogan called the most grueling title fight in years. Du Plessis believes his unpredictable style will disrupt Chimaev, telling Fox 32 News, "This isn't just wrestling, this is MMA." He plans to turn the fight into a dogfight, dragging Chimaev into deep waters where his relentless pressure could break even the toughest. Chimaev, however, is a force of nature. His wrestling is suffocating, chaining takedowns with ground and pound that hits like a freight train. His submission game is lethal. 6 of his 14 wins come by choke or tap-out. But his striking has evolved. Against Whittaker at UFC 308, he showed crisp jabs and devastating hooks, proving he's no one-trick pony. The question is his stamina. Can he sustain that intensity for 25 minutes? Darren Till, who's trained with both fighters, believes Chimaev's fixed his overtraining issues. He's not overtraining no more. Till told Bloody Elbow, "I think he's good for 5 rounds." If Chimaev can impose his grappling early, chaining takedowns and controlling Du Plessis on the mat, he could end it quickly. But if Du Plessis drags him into a war, we might see Chimaev's endurance tested like never before. The stakes are monumental. For Du Plessis, a win cements his legacy as one of the division's all-time greats. He's already beaten Whitaker, Adesanya, and Strickland. Adding Chimaev to that list would silence the doubters for good. For Chimaev, this is the moment he's been chasing since Fight Island. A victory makes him the new king at 185 pounds, fulfilling the prophecy that's been following him for years. But a loss, it could crack the aura of invincibility he's built. The Tapology community is split, with 51% picking Chimaev and 49% backing Du Plessis. Betting odds favor Chimaev at -210, with Du Plessis the underdog at +170. This isn't just about the belt, it's about proving who's the best middleweight on the planet. Fan reactions have been a wildfire. On X, one user posted, "Those guys